Hello guys. In this video, I wanted to talk about some of the assumptions that I have for the priority date movements that we saw in the past few visa bulletins in the current fiscal year. So the question is, what may be the reason for the priority date movements in final action date table and the date of filing table in the past few visa bulletins? Is it spillover unused visa numbers coming from the previous fiscal year causing it to move forward? Is it due to unused visa numbers in the current fiscal year due to visa issuance ban for 75 countries, or both 1 and 2? And that is what we are going to discuss here in this video, and with definitely with some assumptions, because it is all speculations and assumptions for that, as there is no data to show why we have so much of forward movements um, in this case. Okay, let's get started into that. So if I look at the basic limits, right? So the total EB limit per fiscal year is 140,000, right? And if I split that into worldwide limits for EB1, EB2, EB3, and EW3, it comes out as these. And these are the share between these EB categories from that total worldwide limit. Okay. Then from those numbers that we have here, as I'm showing, it gets split into the country-wise cap. So majority of the backlog countries get the 7% cap from the worldwide limit, which is nothing but China, India, Mexico, and Philippines. And remaining numbers go into rest of the world category. Okay, and that's the split you see here in terms of numbers. Okay, now let's talk about assumption I have, right? So first thing is the yellow color highlighted in those numbers, or my assumption that those are the areas that are having a high demand relatively compared to others, right? On those, each of those EB categories. And that is my assumption again. It may not be true. Okay, from the date movements, I'm coming up with that assumption. Okay, now my assumption statement below this table is assuming 75 countries banned from issuance of immigrant visas from rest of the world category in the current fiscal year 2026. Why I say rest of the world is because majority of or most of all these 75 countries fall under rest of the world category. So if those countries were banned from visa issuance, that means those visa numbers should be available for use in demand areas. Okay, and in this case, what I'm assuming is if I calculate the total number visa numbers for 75 countries from the rest of the world portion, then those numbers should be utilized wherever the demand is high to move the dates forward, and that is my speculation. So then the balance available visa numbers from each EB category is calculated as this. So from EB1 standpoint, if I calculate how many visa numbers total comes up for 75 countries, if they are fully blocked from issuance, then it is close to 11K visa numbers for EB1. Similarly for EB2, and close to 8.5K for EB3, and 2800, close to 2800 for EW3. And these are the numbers from the contribution of 75 countries, unused numbers. Okay, and this is assumed to be under the rest of the world because we are considering all these 75 countries fall under the rest of the world. Now, where these numbers may have been applied, and this is again another assumption, as I said, based on where I see as a high demand. So from EB1 standpoint, I see the demand is very high from India backlog standpoint compared to other countries, right? Rest of the world, we have enough number and the demand is lower than the visa number. So it is not a high demand area. China, even though it's part of the backlog country, but it is much farther in the dates than India at that point. And Mexico and Philippines, we know that there are not a lot of demand there for EB1, Mexico and Philippines. So in this case, the relatively high demand area is EB1 India. So probably these total unused numbers from 75 countries that was banned could have been utilized in India EB1 along with the already available number, which is 2800. So it is like what I'm saying is 11,380 plus 2800, coming close to 15K, right? Approximately to round up, is helping, the date movements in India EB1. And that is now moving closely with China dates, synchronized in this way, right? That's what we saw. Second, EB2. So in EB2 as well, if I calculate the visa numbers from 75 countries that may go into unused situation, if that number is applied, and where it is applied, in my assumption, is again EB2 India, because EB2 rest of the world is also in a good shape. There is not a lot of demand. There is enough visa available. Same for China. They are much farther ahead than India. Mexico and Philippines follow rest of the world in this case. So they don't have a lot of demand as well from the EB2 standpoint. So in this case as well, EB2 India may seem like having a high demand. So these numbers from the unused numbers from the current fiscal year derived from those 75 countries could have been utilized as well here in EB2, right, India. And that made a lot of forward movements for EB2 India, which we saw. So this is again another assumption for the EB2 category. Coming to EB3, by calculating that visa number from EB3 rest of the world that could be available for us, right, for anybody to use, based on the calculation, is close to 8,500. Now, those numbers, where is the demand here, right? So when I look at the demand, rest of the world itself have a high demand for EB3 skilled. Okay, so in that case, obviously those numbers, logically would get applied in that area instead of using that in a different area of focus here, right? Because if rest of the world has a demand, and if there is unused numbers in the rest of the world, why not to use that further to move forward, right? And that's what we saw. EB3 rest of the world unused numbers were applied to the same category and made the date movements much farther, which we saw in the recent April visa bulletin, right? And of course, EB3 India and EB3 China skilled did not move much, or not any date movements there, because of this purpose of high demand area, which is coming under rest of the world EB3 skilled. So that is my assumption based on the trend. Okay, let's go to EW3. So EW3, we know the number available is very low, but still the numbers coming from the 75 countries assumption is close to 2,800. So if those numbers are available, then if those numbers, if they are not getting used for those 75 countries, it may have been planned to use for other countries within that same category. So because the demand for EW3 for all the other countries are very, very low with the trend, and there is a very high demand for rest of the world EW3, right, which is EB3 other workers category. And again, in this case, I assume that these 2,800, right, may get utilized in the same category. And that's what we saw maybe in the data filing table. You already saw there were fast forward out of three months, I think 3 months, close to 3 to 4 months forward movement in a total so far in the visa bulletin for EW3. And this might have been the case to contribute to that. And I know that, you know, EW3 will get the cap at 10K. It may not move beyond that, right? That is the rule we have and we saw in the documentations. So yeah, in my case, some of those numbers coming from 75 countries unused was applied to the same category and helped to move forward a little bit there. Not a lot of movement, but we did see some movements in the data filing table. So hopefully that gets utilized within the current fiscal year for EW3, rest of the world. And again, this data and assumption is purely prediction, purely speculation. There is no reference to this data officially anywhere because this is my own analysis of what could be the case. But it may not be the case, what I predicted here. It may be something else, but it is my perspective of looking at the date movement trend versus the situation we are running into of certain countries that are banned from issuance of immigrant visas and things like that. So putting these points together, I came up with this kind of an assumption. Again, there is no official data released to say, yes, this is because of uh, spillover from previous fiscal year, or is it because of the visa availability from those 75 countries that was banned, or it is because of both. There was no official statement released for that. It is, again, a self-analysis and assumption from that. So hope you know this kind of view helps you to understand the perspectives. If you have a different perspective on this date movement, you can provide that detail in the comment section, and I would happy to learn that perspective as well from you guys. All right, thank you.